History YouTube. It is truly a magical place. Hundreds of creators, all sharing the same passion and love for the field. Hundreds of thousands of videos of people explaining and telling new stories about events and characters. Pair that up with magnificent and detailed editing styles and even some art to go alongside it, and you will have people hooked and interested for many hours to come, regardless of how boring or niche topic you are talking about is. I am very sure that plenty of you recognize some of the big players on the platform. Simple History with their elegant animations and iconic voice. History Matters with his cute art style and method of explaining certain topics and questions in a very quick and elegant way. The Armchair Historian and his absolutely stunning animations and way of presentation. And who could forget Kings and Generals? The way he focuses on certain battles and wars in absolute stunning detail down to the smallest unit. Overall, all of these creators bring something unique and exciting to the table, and thanks to them, many people got more interested in this field as well. But there is one man and creator all of us know about, the man who is the absolute undisputed king of history YouTube, completely crushing his competition in every way possible. I am of course talking about the one and only Oversimplified. This man is an icon for a very good reason. He pretty much checks all the boxes. A beautiful and fun art style? Check. Iconic voice? Check. Extremely entertaining way of presentation? Check. Iconic jokes and sense of humor? Check, check, and check. He and his content are perfect in almost every way when it comes to presenting and explaining history to people, no matter whether young or older. I have been a fan of his since pretty much primary school when he released his World War I videos. In fact, and here is some fun Lavader trivia for you, in 9th grade history class I was tasked with making a PowerPoint presentation about the big three of the Axis powers, Hitler, Mussolini, and Hirohito. And on the day of the presentation, when I got to Hitler, I instead played Oversimplified's Hitler documentary to the class with automatic subtitles on. Well, everyone was far too busy with studying for the physics exam later that day, so for the entire presentation I was pretty much talking to a brick wall. But you get the point. Oversimplified has been very influential on the field of internet history. Since his first videos, he has only been improving in every field and he will continue to do so. He has also sparked numerous channels inspired by his style, and even an entire Turkish channel. You know you are doing something right when the Turks barge in and start copying your homework, and that you are responsible for a Turkish family having a normal life in the hellish landscape that is modern Turkey. But as I started making my own content on here and breaking my young zoomer mind free from early 2010s internet brain rot by actually touching a book, I started noticing a few things about Oversimplified and his content. And the more pages I read and the more research I did, the more I started realizing his videos are not that good. So here I am today, the little guy with 30,000 subscribers going up against an absolute titan. Honestly, now that I think about it, I am actually kinda surprised no one really did a response against him. Except for the Marxoids, but to be fair, they bark at any moving thing that hasn't gone 10 seconds without deep-throating Stalin. So let's get into it and see how Oversimplified's content is not only mid at best, but potentially even dangerous and misleading. Ironically, the problem at hand with Oversimplified is in the name itself, Oversimplified. It gives you already from the get-go what you need to know about his channel and his content. He oversimplifies history, giving a very basic story time-like telling of historical events and characters, with the art style we all know and love. Now, presenting history in this entertaining and fun way is not the problem. If anything, today we definitely could use more of it, but it's the specific way these oversimplified events and characters are presented that really bothers me. When it comes to simplifying a certain topic, as with really anything else, there is both a good and bad way of executing that. Standard simplification and oversimplification. We will focus on standard simplification first. Let's imagine you pick up a dense philosophy book like Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. Now, I'll give you a quote from Kant and let's see if it's easy to understand. It is humiliating for human reason that it accomplishes nothing in its pure use, and even requires a discipline to check its extravagances and avoid the deceptions that come from them. But on the other side, that reason can and must exercise this discipline itself without allowing anything else to censor it, elevates it and gives it confidence in itself for the boundaries that it is required to set for its speculative use, at the same time limit the sophistical pretensions of every opponent, and thus it can secure against all attacks everything that may still be left to it from its previously exaggerated demands. How much of that made sense at first glance?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
Probably not much for the average reader, and that's completely normal. So let's try to simplify it. It's frustrating that pure human reason doesn't really achieve anything on its own and even needs to be controlled to stop it from going too far and leading us astray. But the good thing is, reason can control itself without letting anything else tell it what to do. This gives it a sense of confidence because, by setting limits on itself, it also stops others from making false claims. So, even though reason can't give us all the answers, it at least protects us from falling into errors. Now, this simplified version gets the point across much better, right? But notice something. Though the language is easier to follow, the essence of what Kant is saying is still there. This is the difference between simplification that helps understanding and oversimplification. In education, good simplification focuses on why something works or what led to a conclusion. It takes people through the reasoning without losing the details. It's not about dumbing things down or skipping to the end, but about leading people step by step. In history, it's pretty common for people to call certain figures geniuses or dumb for something they did. While you could argue that the action may not have been very bright, it oversimplifies complex motives, decisions, and events. Was there something that happened that made them take that action? Was it really because they were messed up or wise in the head, or were there certain factors into play that they could not control? Let's imagine a general during an important battle who orders his troops to charge straight into enemy lines, even though it looks like a complete suicide mission. To most observers, it might seem like a reckless and dumb decision. In fact, future historians might label this general as incompetent, claiming that he had led his men to certain defeat without any strategic thought. But let's think for a moment. Why did he make that choice? There could be evidence to suggest that the general had received faulty intelligence earlier that day, convincing him that the enemy forces were much weaker than they actually were. On top of that, perhaps a crucial supply line had been cut off, leaving his troops short on resources. With no ability to sustain a prolonged battle, he thought that a decisive strike might be the only chance to turn the tide before his army starved or surrendered. Now, does this make his decision any smarter? Not necessarily, but it shows that it wasn't a simple case of poor judgment or idiocy. Multiple factors, bad intelligence, resource shortages, and so forth, shaped his choice, even if the outcome was disastrous. So when we call him a dumb, incompetent general, we miss out on all the other elements that played into this decision. A meaningful simplification would explore why each side took the actions they did, how historical context shaped their decisions, and what the consequences were. To put it bluntly, a truly effective explanation makes sure people grasp the reasoning behind the facts, not just the conclusion. It respects the complexity of the subject while making it accessible to everyone. To truly understand history or philosophy or really any subject, we need more than just a conclusion. We need to see the path that leads us there. And then we have the other side, oversimplification. This one, which is unfortunately still pretty prevalent, simplifies things for the sake of simplifying. It throws all nuance out the window in favor of a standard black and white good versus evil, dumb versus smart approach. Its main focus is on the conclusion rather than the why of the topic or the event. And when the why and reasons are brought up, they are quickly skimmed through, which doesn't provide enough context to get the full picture. The issue with this approach is that while yes, you have effectively watered down a topic to such a level that anyone can understand it, but by doing so you sacrifice any nuance and depth. And this could lead to misinterpretations or outright lies which will shape people's opinion of that field. Oversimplified is very guilty of this, and I am pretty sure a lot of you probably could count a few examples you noticed from the top of your head. I most noticed these things in a series about the Russian and French Revolution. So I picked one example from his Russian Revolution video and one from the French Revolution, to just make you realize what is at play here. I could go over more, and trust me, there are plenty, but then this video would be hours long and I have a few more things to talk about. In 1917, during the tenure of the Provisional Russian government, Alexander Kerensky, in an effort to save the army, promoted General Lavader Kornilov as chief of staff. Kornilov accepted on the condition that his army reforms would go through and that Kerensky, nor the government, would intervene in them. Now, Kerensky and Kornilov were not too fond of each other personally, but they both put aside their differences, and Kornilov swore his allegiance to the new Russia. Historian Sean McMeekin would write about this in his book on the Russian Revolution. Only after he reassured Kornilov that Kerensky had approved his army reform plan, Savinkov claimed in an interview conducted just days later, did Kornilov calm down. Nonetheless, he noted that, in parting, Kornilov, quote, bade me convey to Kerensky the expression of his satisfaction and the assurance of his perfect loyalty to the government. And then one man burst in and completely destroyed everything: Vladimir Nikolaevich Lvov. Lvov was just about to be fired from his position by Kerensky, so he wanted to give one last middle finger to his former boss. And oh boy, did he give a hell of a middle finger. Lvov traveled to Kornilov's residence and informed him that Kerensky thought of 3 options to fight the Bolshevik threat. The 3 options were Kerensky as dictator, some weird oligarchy, and option 3, Kornilov establishing a military dictatorship. And he, since he thought that his approach would be best, naturally said that he preferred option 3 as long as Kerensky was still involved in the government. Lvov thanked him for his choice and left for Petrograd to have an audience with Kerensky, and I think you can see where this is going.
Корнилов пытается вас свергнуть, он движется на Петроград.
Kerensky, being the paranoid guy that he was, immediately took Lvov at his word, and instead of actually trying to confirm what he heard with Kornilov himself, he immediately declared martial law in Petrograd and ordered Kornilov to be arrested for plotting to overthrow the government. And Kornilov, after hearing this, gathered his men and started marching towards Petrograd. But here is the funny part. Not to overthrow Kerensky and the provisional government, but rather he believed that the Bolsheviks took over the government and were forcing Kerensky to give out these orders. So he marched towards Petrograd to end the Bolsheviks and save Kerensky. To say this whole thing was a misunderstanding would be the understatement of the century. McMeekin would write on this: believing that a right-wing military coup was imminent, Kerensky called an emergency cabinet meeting at midnight. Savinkov, to his immense credit, tried to talk him down, viewing the whole Kornilov business as a fatal misunderstanding, not a conspiracy. But Kerensky was having none of it. He proclaimed melodramatically, "I will not let them have the revolution." In a curious mirror imaging of what he claimed Kornilov was doing, Kerensky asked for, and was granted, dictatorial powers. The Kornilov affair, born in misunderstanding, was now poisoned by bad faith. After reading Kornilov's reply, Kerensky must have realized the mistake both men had made in trusting Lvov. Instead, he doubled down, accusing Kornilov in a follow-up communique of treachery. And then we know what happened afterwards. Kerensky broke the Bolsheviks out of prison to help him in stopping Kornilov. They did, and he was put behind bars. A fatal misunderstanding and miscommunication that would eventually lead to the Bolsheviks taking over. So let's see how Oversimplified portrayed the Kornilov affair.
Hey man, thanks for the promotion. That was real swell of you. Of course, with you by my side, who would dare try to overthrow me? How about me? I did not see this coming. Unfortunately for Kerensky, Kornilov hated the liberal and socialist reforms of the new government, particularly the dumb socialist soldiers' committees. The army was no place for undisciplined left-wing snowflakes. Fearing a Bolshevik takeover was imminent, Kornilov ordered his men towards Petrograd to oust the Soviet and take over.
Yeah. Are you starting to understand what I am getting at here? Actually, I will let Oversimplified take it off with the French Revolution part.
Respect for the monarchy was at an all-time low, as France's finances were spiraling out of control, and the king and his aides really only had one solution to the crisis. Tax the poor. Tax the poor. We could do a sexy calendar shoot. Tax the poor. And so it was. The poor, who were already struggling to make ends meet, found themselves being taxed from every direction. And that's not all. A huge portion of the peasants' harvest had to be given up. And there was also the labor tax, where peasants were required to work a certain number of days for their local lord without pay.
So, first of all, no. Louis XVI did not tax the peasants harder. In fact, one of his first measures to combat the financial crisis France was facing, together with the Controller General of Finances, Charles Alexandre de Calonne, was major tax reforms, which would, among other things, get the clergy and nobility to pay more taxes to evenly distribute the burdens, and lower, eventually replacing the salt tax and other outdated taxes to ease the peasants' burden. Historian John Hardman, in his book about Louis, would write about how enthusiastic the king was to go through with them. Again, Calonne stressed the need for the king's sacred word. For his part, Calonne assured his king that he would sacrifice himself without hesitation to secure success, and if the price of that success were his downfall, then he would think it one worth paying. We know that the king kept his word. Never before or since did he identify so wholeheartedly with the policies of a minister. Whether the Bourbon monarchy had the strength of the Archimedean lever would soon be known. Calonne did not exaggerate when he told the notables that the king had made the measures entirely his own through the close attention he has paid to every single one of them before adopting it. But these reforms were rejected by the Paris Parliament due to the fact that they would lose their tax privileges, and told the king that the only way to change permanent tax laws was through the Estates General, which turned into one of the main reasons why the estates were summoned. So no, Louis's only option wasn't to tax the poor, but quite the opposite. Also, about that labor tax thing, it was abolished under Louis's reign. Yeah, it ceased to exist around 20 years before the revolution, but Oversimplified makes absolutely no mention of that. I mean, some of the stuff I noticed in his Russian Revolution video just straight up borders on historical revisionism and lies. Okay, the best example of this were the protests that took place in Petrograd that kicked off the February Revolution, where 300,000 people marched in the streets. Now, the exact motivations of the protesters are kinda hard to pin down, but one thing was for certain: they were very pro-war. They believed that a German conspiracy was underway in Petrograd with the aid of Rasputin that would see Russia pulling out of the war, a conspiracy utilized by the Russian liberals during the revolution. McMeekin would write how when some people tried to call for pacifism and anti-war sentiment, the crowds quickly tore it all down. We can only surmise what the real motivations of the protesters may have been. Most eyewitness accounts agree that anti-war sentiments were not at this stage prominent. The basic line taken all winter by liberal critics from Milyukov to Guchkov was, after all, that the regime was honeycombed by defeatists and pro-German traitors. This was a far cry from pacifism. According to the social revolutionary veteran of the 1905 revolution, Vladimir Zenzinov, the raising of a "Down with the War" placard in Znamenskaya Square on Saturday afternoon evoked protests from the crowd, and it was withdrawn immediately. And at the forefront of the protest was Alexandra, the wife of Nicholas II. Utilizing the fact that she was of German descent, the protesters pretty much argued for her death and that she was quote-unquote influencing Nicholas to end the war and pull Russia out. Again, McMeekin would write, "The political mood of the time was captured by a more commonly seen placard reading, 'Down with the German woman.' Basically, the demonstrators in Petrograd supported the war and called for an end of the supposed pro-German shadow government, and naturally the Russian liberals utilized this sentiment to secure their position and overthrow the Tsar during the February Revolution." Now, watch how Oversimplified presented this.
On International Women's Day, 1917, thousands of hungry women in Petrograd were so sick of being hungry that they took to the streets. And it turns out it's not just women who experience hunger, but men too. So the next day they joined in as well. Gatherings on the streets were forbidden, but I'm not sure how you'd arrest 250,000 people. The crowds demanded an end to the war, an end to food rationing, and even an end to the Tsar's autocracy.
This is just straight up historical revisionism at this point. Like, I know that a lot of the mainstream things we know about the Russian Revolution come from the Soviet Union, but come on, it dissolved a long time ago and historians now know a lot more objectively what took place in those years. Again, I could sit here for hours going over every single thing he got wrong in these videos, and this is just about the topics and events I have a lot of knowledge on and read books about. Who knows what other things he got completely and blatantly wrong in all the other ones. Now, I am not gonna claim anything we don't have concrete knowledge on, but I am starting to wonder where Oversimplified gets all his information from. What are his sources? Again, these are just speculations because we don't know where he gets his research from, but I have this gut feeling that he, at most, does mid-level internet research on these subjects through Wikipedia pages, other YouTube videos, and the numerous other articles on the internet. Despite him being oversimplified in every sense of the word, we do see that he does actually put quite a bit of effort into research since he talks about many things similar to a Wikipedia page. But would it really be that difficult to read a proper book on the topic written by a historian so you can get all the context and nuance of the topic you are talking about? I mean, McMeekin's book, one of the best in regards to the Russian Revolution, appears as one of the first if you Google Russian Revolution book. The Kornilov affair would have been excellent material for his style and way of presentation, and I do believe he would have absolutely loved it if he came across the full context of what happened and included it in his video. And he would have if he just, again, picked up a book. So why am I exactly complaining about all of this? I mean, I literally go watch a channel called Oversimplified and then act shocked when the videos are oversimplified. Yes. And that is exactly why I am criticizing him. It's not just about some random YouTuber who talks about history to some audience. No, there is a bigger picture here for us. Something we have been seeing as the internet and YouTube started getting more and more widespread and taken seriously. Let me ask you this. When we click on an oversimplified video, what is the primary reason and incentive for watching his content? Is it learning about history? Sure, that may be a factor, but if that was the primary one, you would be picking up books about the Punic Wars from your local bookshop. No, the primary reason any of us watch his videos is entertainment. The animation, jokes, and his overall way of presentation is what we are truly here for. Everything else, including the information, comes second. I mean, Oversimplified could literally make a video about photosynthesis and it could still rack up tens of millions of views. So what is the issue here? You see, when a video focuses more on the entertainment aspect, it tends to put viewers into a state of ease and relaxation, a mental state that makes it much easier for them to accept information without questioning it. Psychologically, this effect is known as the elaboration likelihood model, which suggests that when people are relaxed or entertained, they are more likely to process information through the peripheral route rather than the central route. The peripheral route relies on superficial cues such as humorous animation or charismatic presentation, rather than a critical evaluation of the content itself. Essentially, if something is entertaining or enjoyable, people often accept the accompanying message without much scrutiny, because their defenses are down. This is particularly effective because humans are emotional beings by nature. Our brains have evolved to prioritize emotion over rationality. Emotional appeals activate the limbic system, the part of the brain involved in our emotional and behavioral responses. When a video, like those by Oversimplified, delivers information with humor, vibrant colors, and engaging storytelling, it directly taps into our emotions, making us more receptive. This emotional engagement creates a feeling of trust and familiarity, often completely bypassing our rational skepticism. In contrast, rational analysis requires effort and a state of alertness, which is pretty difficult to maintain when we're being entertained. This is why viewers may end up accepting oversimplified or even inaccurate portrayals of complex historical events, because their emotional brain is in control, not the critical rational side. As a wise man once said, there is no such thing as an unconvincing argument, only a lack of editing skills. We political YouTubers do not have this luxury. When people look at my videos, they don't enter it for the sake of entertainment. Well, at least not primarily. They enter with the expectations of being informed or to see what my arguments are, so they can either respond to them or accept them. Basically, the brain is more in a state of alertness and pays more attention carefully to the topic being talked about. Our videos, therefore, when being watched, primarily go down the central route of information processing, with all the critical thinking attached to it. Now, is this something inherently bad? Should this way of presentation be abandoned? No, not really. In fact, I would even go as far as to promote it. The biggest perk of this way of presenting a topic is the fact, as I have mentioned, that people genuinely learn more from it rather than a bland giant history textbook that will make anyone bored out of their mind. The reason why the status quo of teaching history in primary school and high school has largely remained is because it really was the best way for history to be taught to children who largely do not have such a big interest in it. Dumbing down topics and fields in black and white ways is much more easily digestible than teaching all the nuance about that topic. That is something actual historians need to concern themselves with. But with digitalization coming around and us creators now being taken more seriously, we have an actual and real chance of breaking the status quo. This way, history is being taught through this black and white great man theory-esque way. We can now utilize our creativity, our storytelling, our humor, and our research to not only make children and teens interested, but for them to actually learn and understand, something that actually honors their capabilities of understanding a nuanced topic, even at such an early age, rather than diminishing it. Teachers and professors across schools are now utilizing content creators more and more to teach history because they recognize that this way, students will actually learn and retain all the information much more easily and efficiently. And I have absolutely no doubt that Oversimplified's videos have been shown hundreds if not thousands of times across classrooms. Hell, again, I literally did that when I was in 9th grade. Ironically, this also goes for me. Over a year ago, I was contacted by an American high school history teacher regarding my video on Kaiser Wilhelm II, and he asked me for some additional resources I utilized because he wanted to use it in his class material to give a more nuanced and neutral viewpoint of World War I, presenting the views and actions of all sides, rather than the usual Entente Germany bad way. To think the videos I made have actually had a real-life impact on a high school history class is something I am truly proud and happy about. That is the point I am trying to make. We content creators don't just make stuff anymore for anonymous internet users who spend 8 hours a day watching videos, but now also something that is impacting the general public. And no doubt with continued digitalization, content creators may be utilized more to actually teach students. What I am saying is, we now also have a responsibility. Kids, teens, and really anyone deserve a richer, more nuanced understanding of history, one that acknowledges complexities and fosters critical thinking. We need to move away from the outdated methods that present history in oversimplified narratives of heroes and villains, and instead inspire genuine curiosity about the forces that shape human events. Let's remember, history isn't just a collection of dates and names, it's the story of humanity in all its messiness. If we want the next generation to learn from the past, we need to present it to them authentically, respecting their ability to understand and grow from its lessons. And that is why, from my point of view, it's really disappointing that Oversimplified doesn't realize that oversimplification is actually the main problem here. In a way, he is actually upholding the status quo of how we are taught, albeit in an actual successful way, with his way of presentation. If he actually did a little more research about the nuances of the topics and individuals he is talking about, it would be a massive improvement. He is the king of history YouTube, and that is why I exactly believe he should perhaps rethink his whole approach. Now, does this mean you should completely stop watching him and not take anything he says seriously? No, of course not. There is still some merit to it, but just keep in mind that he is oversimplified in the end, and if anything, take what you hear from him with a massive grain of salt and be under the impression that perhaps there is something more at play here. In fact, since I already mentioned I could sit for hours here going over his videos, let's do it. If this video gets at least 5,000 likes, I will do an entire breakdown of his Russian Revolution video, no matter for how many hours I'm gonna have to sit down and talk. So, that is all for today, and I will see you all next time.